The balloons sagged against the ceiling, tied with mismatched ribbons I had scavenged from the discount bin. The cake sat on the table, its frosting smudged in places because I couldn't afford a professional bakery, so I baked it myself after my late shift. My son, Caleb, only 10, kept running to the window every few minutes, pressing his little palms to the glass, waiting for headlights to pull up, for footsteps on the porch, for laughter to spill through the door. I kept telling him, "They'll be here soon, sweetheart, just wait." But deep down, I already knew the truth. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. The living room looked almost festive. Streamers hanging from thumbtacks, paper plates stacked neatly, soda bottles lined up like soldiers. I had done everything alone. Every invitation sent by text, every reminder call, every small hope that for once, my family would show up for my child, not just for my sister's endless celebrations. Caleb's eyes sparkled with a kind of faith I'd lost years ago. He believed his grandparents, his aunt, his uncle would come. He even set out chairs for them himself. "Grandma sits here, Uncle Dave here, Aunt Melissa here," he whispered like he was casting a spell that would force them to arrive. 8 o'clock came, then 9. The candles on the cake melted into wax puddles before I blew them out myself. Caleb's smile started trembling, but he still asked, "Maybe they're just late?" I forced a smile that cracked at the edges and said, "Maybe, baby, maybe." Finally, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. I opened it with shaking hands, praying for an apology, an excuse, anything. But it was just a video. My sister's face filled the screen, a birthday hat on her head, surrounded by everyone, my parents, my brother, cousins, even family friends. They were laughing, clapping, singing to her for her 32nd birthday. My mom's voice cut through the noise. "This is how you celebrate family, not trash." And then the camera panned to the table. My mom sneered, "Hope your little boy enjoys eating alone." They laughed harder. Caleb peeked at the screen before I could hide it. His lips quivered. "Why didn't they come, Mom? Don't they like me?" His voice cracked in that innocent way only a child's can, stabbing me deeper than any insult ever had. I held him close, whispering, "You are worth everything. They don't deserve you." But inside, something broke. Not just sadness, not just rage, but a vow forming like steel in my veins. Later that night, when Caleb finally cried himself to sleep clutching the unopened presents I had wrapped, I sat alone in the dim light, staring at that video again and again. Their voices, their laughter, my mother's words, "None celebrate trash," echoed in my skull. I remembered every slight, every time they chose my sister over me, every time they dismissed Caleb, like he was invisible. And for the first time, I didn't just ache. I planned. They thought ignoring my child was harmless. They thought humiliating me was a family tradition. They thought they'd never pay. But as I stared at those empty chairs and the untouched plates of food, I realized something they hadn't. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. The next morning, Caleb woke up quiet. Too quiet. He didn't ask about leftovers, didn't mention the presents anymore, didn't even look toward the window like he had last night. He just dragged his backpack onto his shoulder and said, "It's fine, Mom. I didn't need a party anyway." My heart clenched. 10-year-olds aren't supposed to sound like that. He should have been talking about toys, bikes, video games, not about teaching himself not to expect love. I walked him to school, and when he turned back to wave, I promised myself I'd never let them crush his spirit again. My parents, my siblings, they thought I'd keep swallowing it, keep patching my son's heart with weak excuses. Not this time. When I came back home, I replayed the video my mom had sent, over and over. Their faces flushed with laughter, my dad raising a glass saying, "Finally celebrating someone worthy." My sister blowing kisses at the camera, holding her overpriced designer cake, and Mom clapping along saying that word again, trash. They didn't just forget. They wanted me and my son to feel small. That was when my idea began to form. They had spent their entire lives building an image. The perfect family. My sister, the successful one, the golden daughter. My parents, the proud caretakers who raised a shining star. Every party, every holiday, every photo posted online was another piece of that illusion, and Caleb and I were always the shadow they tried to crop out. So if they thrived on image, then that was what I'd take from them. Not with a camera, not with a viral post. They'd see it unravel from within, where no likes or shares could save them. I started by calling my brother Dave. I told him calmly, "You left my son sitting in an empty room last night. Did you feel proud when Mom called him trash?" Silence stretched on the line before he muttered, "Don't drag me into your drama. Melissa's birthday was important. Caleb's just a kid. He'll get over it." That sentence lit a fire under me. He'll get over it. Like children's pain was disposable, like my son's tears were background noise. The next step was harder. I went back to my parents' house. They were sitting at the table laughing over leftover cake from my sister's party. Mom's first words when she saw me were, "Oh, here comes the beggar. Didn't get enough pity last night?" Dad didn't even look up from his plate. I dropped the invitations I had printed weeks before onto the table. Each one had Caleb's name in big, bold letters, the time, the place, the promise of celebration. You ignored these. You ignored him, and you laughed while he cried. My voice shook, but not with weakness, with something sharp, something ready to cut. Mom smirked. "Because he's not worth it. Kids like Caleb don't shine. Melissa shines. That's why people show up for her. That's why money gets spent on her. You should have known better than to waste your energy on a party for nobody." Dad finally looked at me, his voice low, almost a growl. "Stop trying to drag us into your failures. Your boy is invisible. The sooner you accept that, the easier it'll be." Invisible. That word sealed it. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "Then I'll make sure he's the only one people see. And when that happens, you'll wish you'd shown up for him when you had the chance." I walked out before they could answer. My hands were trembling, but my mind had never been clearer. They wanted Caleb invisible? Fine. I'd strip away their spotlight until the world they built around Melissa, their precious star, collapsed. I started small, quiet phone calls, subtle shifts. I reached out to people they cared about, people who thought my parents were the picture-perfect grandparents. I didn't rant. I didn't scream. I simply told the truth. About the empty chairs, the unanswered invitations, the words they called their grandson. One by one, those friends grew cold toward them. And then I moved on to Melissa. She had an upcoming awards dinner, another spotlight moment. Invitations sent out, photographers booked. I didn't need to ruin the dinner itself. I just needed to redirect every pair of eyes. This wasn't about humiliating them online. This wasn't about a single loud moment of revenge. This was about dismantling the foundation they stood on, brick by brick, until Caleb's absence in their lives became the hole they couldn't cover up. And I was just getting started. The night of Melissa's awards dinner arrived, the one my parents had been bragging about for weeks. Our daughter, the rising star, my mom had repeated to anyone who would listen. Caleb sat beside me at the kitchen table, carefully folding napkins into shapes he had learned at school. He didn't know exactly what I was planning, only that I promised him he wouldn't feel invisible anymore. That week, I had worked quietly, setting everything into motion. I contacted the organizers of the event, people my parents thought adored them. I wasn't dramatic about it. I simply explained who they were. I told them how my parents laughed while their grandson sat alone on his birthday, how they called him trash, how they demanded he be invisible so their favorite daughter could shine. I didn't need to exaggerate. The truth itself was sharp enough to cut through every fake smile they had ever worn. At first, the organizers were skeptical. People don't want to believe cruelty that naked. But then, I showed them the recording, the video my mom had sent me, her laughter, her exact words. None celebrate trash. The audio was clear as day, and my dad's voice, cutting in with his smug toast, finally celebrating someone worthy. Their own pride became the blade I turned against them. The fallout was quicker than I imagined. That night, As the guests filed into the grand hall, whispers began spreading. Faces turned toward my parents with hesitation, confusion, then disgust. Melissa stood at the entrance in her designer gown, waiting for the applause that usually washed over her. Instead, she was met with silence so thick it made her flinch. My parents forced a laugh, my mom hissing, "Ignore them, just keep smiling." But the tide had already turned. The host of the evening took the stage, and instead of glowing praise, he addressed the crowd with a chilling shift. "Tonight, we celebrate achievement, but we also remember the responsibility of family. We cannot turn a blind eye to cruelty." Gasps swept the hall as the video played. Their voices filled the speakers, echoing in a room that once adored them. My mom's laughter, my dad's toast, the words that had shattered my son. Melissa's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. My parents stood frozen, their forced smiles collapsing. The room that had once been their stage now became their courtroom, and their own words were the evidence. I wasn't there in person. I didn't need to be. I sat at home with Caleb, a small cake glowing between us with 10 candles, the celebration he deserved. When he asked softly, "Why are people going to see Grandma and Grandpa's video?" I kissed his forehead and said, "Because they need to learn that every word matters, and because you matter." Meanwhile, the consequences rippled outward. My parents' friends cut ties overnight. The social clubs they flaunted shut their doors. Melissa's sponsors quietly pulled their offers. The awards dinner that was meant to crown her became the moment she, and my parents, lost everything they had built their pride on. The next day, my phone buzzed with call after call. My mom's voice, frantic. "How could you do this? You ruined us!" My dad's anger cracking at the edges. "Ungrateful. You'll regret this. I hung up. I had no space left for their poison. But the real victory wasn't their downfall. It was Caleb. The following week, when he walked into school, kids who had never noticed him before came running up. "Hey, happy late birthday? We heard what happened. You're amazing, Caleb." His teacher gave me a look filled with tears, and later she told me she'd spoken to the class about kindness, about standing up for those who feel invisible. For the first time, Caleb wasn't just the shadow. He was seen. Weeks passed, and my parents kept spiraling, desperate to claw back their reputation. But reputations can be rebuilt. What can't be rebuilt is trust, the bond with the grandson they dismissed like garbage. Caleb no longer asked if Grandma or Grandpa would visit. He no longer waited at the window for family that would never show. He had stopped needing them, and instead, he leaned into the love I gave him, the love they never could. One evening, months later, I saw my mom standing outside our apartment building. Her face was pale, her hair messy, her once perfect posture sagging. She begged, "Please, let us explain. We were wrong. We need him. We need you." I opened the door just enough for her to see Caleb behind me, sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully fixing the chain on his new bike, the one I'd bought with money from extra shifts. He looked up at me, then at her, and asked simply, "Mom, who is that?" Her lips trembled. She realized he truly didn't recognize her as someone who mattered. I closed the door. That was the end of their power. Not because they were humiliated in front of others, but because they lost the only thing they could never replace: Caleb's place in their lives. My parents had always believed that love was something they could ration, something to withhold from me and my son while pouring it endlessly onto my sister. But love doesn't work like that. It isn't a trophy you give to the child you deem worthy. It's a bond you either honor or lose forever. And they had lost. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.